Before the 2016 election, most people had never heard of QAnon, myself among them. The conspiracy theory-fueled group, it is now becoming a force to say within the GOP. They seem to be everywhere during both the 16 and particularly the 20 elections, packing Trump rallies, confronting Democrats, and even trying to drive a campaign bus that Kamala Harris was in off of a highway in Texas. Now, among the insane part of their conspiracies is one that top Democrats are, in their words, trafficking children as sex slaves, prompting even one man to storm a D.C. pizza place with an assault weapon so he could look for kids that obviously were not there. And just this week, Passion of the Christ star Jim Caviezel, he went all QAnon during an anti-vax COVID conference with a bizarre QAnon theory that thousands of children are being murdered so people can harvest their blood and adrenal glands because blood and the glands will stop or reverse the aging process. I'm not making this up as much as I wish I was. QAnon has a fully fledged representative in Congress, Georgia's Marjorie Taylor Greene, whose parroting of QAnon claims combined with her own insanity has led to her being barred from every committee in Congress. But get this, she's raised more than $3 million so far just in 2021, proof positive that QAnon is an ongoing threat and has its adherents. Now, the QAnon mindset has merged neatly with anti-vaccination conspiracies. One of the main reasons, some 40% of Republicans now say they will never get the COVID vaccine. And then, of course, came the most obvious and most dangerous QAnon moment thus far, the Capitol riot. Speakers on January 6th echoed QAnon messaging. Lots of rioters had signs or other insignia supporting Q, and the FBI told Congress that they've arrested 5 rioters who were active in QAnon. As of early February, they'd identified 27 QAnon rioters, a number likely to increase as prosecutions continue, all showing a direct link between QAnon and the January 6th riot. QAnon is a distinctly American phenomenon, started here, now spreading through right-wing movements in other countries, though. And a new report from the Soufan Center says that foreign governments are using QAnon to essentially attack the U.S. The report concludes that Russia led the way, amplifying a lot of QAnon messaging online through most of 2020, but that starting this January, China, it took that title away and is now leading QAnon amplifier, with both Iran and Saudi Arabia also doing so, albeit to a lesser degree. So why are foreign governments doing this? Well, the report concludes foreign states are utilizing the QAnon conspiracy theory to sow societal discord and even compromise legitimate political processes. For more, let's turn to one of the main researchers on that report, Mollie Saltskog. She is a research fellow at the Soufan Center. And Mollie, I'm curious, we mentioned an unholy alliance, if you will, with some of the anti-vaccine groups and some of the QAnon folks. Did they merge these grievance and conspiracy groups out of like an organic way, or were they intentionally kind of brought together for a common interest of that discord being sown domestically?
Well, thank you first for having me. It's great to be here and to talk about our new report that came out this week, which does show that the QAnon movement poses a credible threat to the United States national security. And your question is critically important here, because what we showed in our research is that the QAnon conspiracy theory and the movement has latched on to specific societal grievances that has allowed it to evolve. We've seen that in the aftermath of January 6th and the insurrection on the Capitol, there has indeed been some splintering in the movement. Some followers have become disillusioned, whilst other ones have really doubled down in quote unquote trusting the plan as set out by Q. And what we see there is that they're also seeking to leverage other existing societal grievances to attract new recruits. And the 2 examples that we highlighted is For example, the vaccine skepticism movement, but also the anti-abortion movement. And these are, societal movements that people express sincere, beliefs in. But what QAnon and the QAnon followers are trying to do is co-opt this movement for bringing people further into the QAnon conspiracy theory. For example, by hijacking hashtags. And this is nothing new. We've seen how ISIS, for example, have also hijacked hashtags to spread their hateful creed.
I was struck, Mollie, by some of the folks that were at the Capitol on January 6th and who they were turned in by, including family members, including children who had said, I remember one in particular, my mom was a regular mom up until 6-7 months ago when all of a sudden she got trapped in this QAnon cycle where she really believed it to the point that she stormed the Capitol. I guess my question is this cultish? Do we dismiss it? Or are these people shoulder to shoulder with white nationalists and extremists because they really buy this idea that we're on the verge of a civil war? Because QAnon started out as something completely different. I'm wondering how they got co-opted to be under the same umbrella.
No, I mean, this is a critically important question that you ask here, in the sense that I think oftentimes, whilst our study is very data-driven and looks at the aggregate, right, looks at the number of people who self-identify as believing in some facet of the QAnon conspiracy theory, or the percentage of Facebook posts that are deemed to come be foreign influence, but what we also need to understand is that we're talking about people's lives. And rightly, as you point out, there have been numerous reports about how this conspiracy theory has fractured families and torn families apart. And there are even people who have so vehemently believed in this conspiracy theory that they've been dragged into, that they mobilized towards violent attacks, including participating in the insurrection at the Capitol. And one of the women, she tragically lost her life at the Capitol because she believed in this conspiracy theory, which put her there. And so I think what our report shows is that whilst there's still, writ large, a fairly small number of people who believe in QAnon, who have mobilized towards acts of violence, the movement is now poised to become a significant national security threat.
Mollie, forgive my scientific definition of this, but listen, we've always seen people who love the conspiracy theories, from the Loch Ness Monster to Bigfoot, etc., but Area 51, but these were harmless conspiracy theories that, you'd find jokes in sitcoms. This is nuts. Cannibalism, child pedophile rings, I can go on, but I mean, the more you say it, the more, who could possibly believe this? Have they gotten more adherents since January 6th? I mean, I can't believe people believe this, but you believe that there's a force multiplier here. We'll get into in a second about what's going on by foreign actors, preying on this, but $3 million Marjorie Taylor Greene has raised just in the first few months of this year. Obviously, people support this garbage. Just how big has this become?
Well, our polling suggested that over 20% of respondents self-identify as believing in the QAnon conspiracy theory in one way or another. And that's quite a lot of people, and so what's also important is that when you look at other conspiracy theories that are feeding into the QAnon conspiracy theory, like a child sex trafficking ring run by the global elite, or COVID was created in a lab, and those types of conspiracy theory. An even bigger percent believed in those, which seems to suggest that there's a cognitive opening amongst the U.S. population to be further radicalized into the QAnon conspiracy theory.
So did Russia, and then soon after China, and you said Iran and Saudi Arabia, did they come in after the fact where they said, wait a minute, you got a lot of crazies which can only, create more discord in the States. Let's amplify this? Or did they have their fingerprints on really the birth of this to make sure it got as wide an audience as it got?
Well, our study looked at 2020 and the first 2 months of 2021, which included following January 6th. And what's quite striking is that the level of foreign influence, as we defined it, that a QAnon categorized post was originated by a foreign administrator, it remained quite constant. We saw that it spiked. It indeed spiked during very specific societal events here in the United States, like when COVID first became a major health crisis in March, or during the murder, the murder of George Floyd, or the QAnon Wayfair conspiracy.
Mollie, a very interesting report. I appreciate you giving us some time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, when we come back, we're going to shift to COVID as well as the COVID vaccines to push on to overcome that vaccine hesitancy. But new numbers show just how tough that might be. We're going to talk that plus the J&J shot and more with ABC News Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Jen Ashton.